Strange tales, yet mirrors of human life. Hey everyone! Welcome to Encountering Chinese, Strange Tales from Zhai. Today, I'm going to bring you a story called Xiao. Wang Taichang was from the Yu region. When he was young, he had a strange experience. One year, when Wang Taichang was still a child, he was lying in bed when suddenly the sky turned dark, clouds gathered, and thunder roared. Suddenly, an animal, slightly larger than a cat, ran into the room and lay down under him, refusing to leave. As the thunder gradually faded and the sky cleared up, the little creature slowly crawled out. Wang Taichang looked closely and realized it wasn't a cat, which made him feel alarmed. He then called out to his older brother loudly from behind the wall. Hearing this, his older brother was overjoyed and said, "Kiddo, this is an auspicious sign. The fox came to you to escape the thunderstorm, which means it knows you're under divine protection and can keep it safe from harm. This is a sure sign that you'll become a high-ranking official in the future." True enough, Wang Taichang passed the imperial examination at a young age and rose quickly from being a county magistrate to becoming a censor. Although Wang Taichang was successful in his official career, he couldn't find happiness, for he had a son named Wang Yuanfeng who was born mentally disabled. Despite being 16 years old, Wang Yuanfeng couldn't even tell the difference between men and women. As a result, no families were willing to form a marriage alliance with the Wang family. Every time Wang Taichang saw his son's foolishness, he would furrow his brow and sigh in distress. One day, a woman came to the Wang household, bringing a young maiden with her. She proposed that the maiden marry Wang Yuanfeng. When Wang Taichang saw the girl, he was overjoyed. The girl had delicate features, a gentle smile, and was so beautiful that she resembled an angel. Wang Taichang, so thrilled that his voice trembled, asked the woman her name. She introduced herself as Madame Yu and explained that the maiden was her daughter, named Xiao, who had just turned 16. Wang Taichang cautiously inquired about the dowry, but Madame Yu shook her head and smiled, saying, "Xiao and I have been traveling for so long, surviving on very little. We are grateful she can marry into your family and live in a fine home, eat good food, and be treated with respect. She is content with that. I am marrying off my daughter, not selling vegetables. How can I bargain with you?" Wang Taichang's wife was also pleased to hear this and quickly began to treat the mother and daughter with great hospitality. Madame Yu then instructed Xiao to kneel and pay respects to Wang Taichang and his wife, saying, "From now on, these two will be your parents-in-law. You must serve them well. I have some matters to attend to, so I will leave now. I will return in 3 to 5 days to see you." Wang Taichang wished to send Madame Yu off with a carriage, but she politely declined, saying, "My home is not far from here, no need for a ride." After saying this, she left the Wang household. Xiao, seeing her mother leave, showed no sadness or longing. She simply rummaged through the vanity box she had brought with her, preparing to do some embroidery work. Wang Taichang's wife, seeing Xiao's graceful and composed demeanor, could not help but feel even more fond of her. A few days later, Madame Yu did not return as promised. Wang Taichang and his wife asked Xiao Tsui where her family lived, but Xiao Tsui seemed to be unable to clearly say where her home was. Helpless, the Wang family had to prepare the wedding on their own for the young couple and arranged a house for them as their marital home. When relatives heard that Wang Taichang's family had found a daughter-in-law from a poor family, they secretly mocked him. However, when they saw Xiao Tsui, her intelligence and beauty were so remarkable that they dared not gossip anymore. Not only was Xiao Tsui beautiful, but she was also unusually clever and knew how to act according to her in-laws' mood. Wang Taichang and his wife were very fond of this daughter-in-law, but occasionally, they couldn't help but feel uneasy, worrying that Xiao Tsui might come to dislike their foolish son. However, Xiao Tsui was always cheerful and never showed even the slightest bit of contempt for Wang Yuanfeng. She seemed to enjoy teasing him, though. Xiao Tsui sewed a ball out of cloth and kicked it around in the yard, making Wang Yuanfeng laugh heartily. She would kick the ball far with her small leather boots, and then ask Yuanfeng to run after it. By the end of the day, Wang Yuanfeng and the maids were exhausted and drenched in sweat. One day, Wang Taichang was passing by his son's yard when the ball suddenly flew out and hit him in the face with a loud thud. Seeing this, Xiao Tsui and the maids were terrified and quickly ran away, but Wang Yuanfeng didn't care at all and continued chasing the ball. Wang Taichang, enraged, picked up a stone and threw it at his son. The stone struck Wang Yuanfeng, and he immediately fell to the ground crying. Afterward, Wang Taichang, too embarrassed to directly scold his daughter-in-law, told his wife about the incident. Wang Taichang's wife went to her son's house to reprimand Xiao Tsui, but Xiao Tsui merely smiled and lowered her head, occasionally picking at the edge of the bed. After Wang Taichang's wife left, Xiao Tsui acted as if nothing had happened and continued to tease Wang Yuanfeng. She applied face powder on his face, painting it unrecognizable. Wang Taichang's wife found out and became even more upset. She called Xiao Tsui over and scolded her harshly. However, Xiao Tsui leaned against a corner, playing with the ties on her clothes, not speaking or showing any fear. With no choice, Wang Taichang's wife, unwilling to physically punish her daughter-in-law, picked up a stick and began to strike her son. Wang Yuanfeng was so frightened that he cried out, and seeing this, Xiao Tsui seemed to feel sorry for her husband. Her face changed suddenly, and she knelt down, repeatedly begging for mercy. Seeing her show such affection for her son, Wang Taichang's wife's anger immediately subsided. She tossed the stick aside and pretended to leave in a huff. After she left, Xiao Tsui returned to her cheerful demeanor, took Wang Yuanfeng into the house, dusted off his clothes, wiped his tears, and gently rubbed his bruises. She even brought dates and chestnuts for him to eat, and only then did Wang Yuanfeng stop crying and smile. From then on, Xiao Tsui closed the yard door and played even more freely with Yuanfeng. Sometimes, she dressed Wang Yuanfeng up as Xiangyu, and sometimes as a Xiongnu person. She herself would change into glamorous outfits, sometimes impersonating Yu Ji and dancing gracefully, and at other times inserting a pheasant tail into her hair and playing the pipa. Laughter and cheer filled their new home almost every day, accompanied by the sound of music ringing out. Wang Taichang, feeling guilty over his son's foolishness, never wanted to scold his daughter-in-law too harshly. Even when he heard of her antics, he simply turned a blind eye and did not intervene. Nearby, there lived a man named Wang, an official who was a remonstrator. The two families, despite sharing the same surname, had never interacted because of differing political views, though they lived only a few households apart. That year, it was time for the court's triennial official assessment, and Wang, the remonstrator, who envied Wang Taichang's authority over the inspection of Hunan, secretly spread rumors about him among his colleagues. When Wang Taichang heard of this, he was anxious but at a loss for how to deal with it. One night, Wang Taichang went to bed early, but Xiao Tsui, dressed in official robes and pretending to be a prime minister, also attached white silk threads to her chin to mimic a beard. She had two maids dress in black to act as attendants. Smiling, she said, "I'm going to visit Lord Wang." Xiao Tsui secretly led a horse from the stable, rode it, and proudly rode to the house of Wang, the remonstrator. She pretended to whip the two maids and loudly shouted, "I am going to visit Wang Taichang, the imperial censor, not Wang the remonstrator. You've taken the wrong road." After saying this, she turned the horse around and galloped back home. As soon as she reached the doorman heard the noise. Since it was dark, he mistakenly thought that the prime minister had arrived and hurriedly went into the inner courtyard to report the matter to Wang Taichang. Wang Taichang, upon hearing the report, rushed out of bed, grabbed a robe, and hurriedly went out to greet the supposed visitor. However, when he shone the lantern at the gate, he realized it was his daughter-in-law playing a prank. Wang Taichang was so furious that he nearly fainted. Returning to the house, he angrily told his wife, "I've always had a conflict with Wang the remonstrator, and he's looking for any way to bring me down. Our dear daughter-in-law has actively brought this embarrassment to his door. Now, we're in big trouble." Wang Taichang's wife was both angry and worried. She rushed to Xiao Tsui's room and scolded her. Xiao Tsui, however, simply lowered her head and smiled, neither defending herself nor looking upset. Wang Taichang's wife, feeling both angry and helpless, thought about striking her, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. She also considered sending Xiao Tsui away from the family, but feared that her daughter-in-law would have nowhere to go. The entire night, Wang Taichang and his wife were both anxious and angry, unable to sleep as they pondered the matter. Speaking of Wang the remonstrator, that very night, Xiao Tsui arrived at his house. In terms of appearance, attire, and attendance, she resembled the Prime Minister to a T. The Prime Minister was a man of great power and status, and Wang the remonstrator, who normally dared not even raise his head to look at him, was convinced that the person standing before him was indeed the Prime Minister. Later, he secretly sent someone to inquire at Wang Taichang's home, and the messenger returned with the report that the Prime Minister had even spent the night at Wang Taichang's house. Wang the remonstrator was now certain that Wang Taichang and the Prime Minister shared a close relationship and that they must be plotting something significant. The next day, during the morning court session, Wang the remonstrator saw Wang Taichang and asked, "Did the Prime Minister visit your house yesterday?" Wang Taichang, assuming he already knew everything and was merely mocking him, stammered and gave an ambiguous reply, not daring to say more. This only strengthened Wang the remonstrator's suspicions. From that moment on, he no longer dared to speak ill of Wang Taichang behind his back. Instead, he actively sought to make amends and form a friendship with him. Later, when Wang Taichang learned the truth, he was both angry and amused. However, he secretly told his wife to advise Xiao Tsui to tone things down a bit, and Xiao Tsui happily agreed. A year later, the Prime Minister was dismissed. He wrote a private letter that was originally meant for Wang Taichang, but it was mistakenly delivered to Wang the Remonstrator's house. Upon receiving the letter, Wang the Remonstrator thought he had found something compromising about Wang Taichang and had a friend go to Wang Taichang's house to blackmail him, asking to borrow 10,000 taels of silver. However, the request was rejected. Frustrated, Wang the Remonstrator decided to personally deliver a visiting card and paid Wang Taichang a visit. As Wang the Remonstrator arrived in haste, Wang Taichang could only hurriedly search for his ceremonial robes to prepare for the visit but could not find them. Wang the Remonstrator, growing impatient, turned to leave. Just as he was stepping out of the hall, he saw Wang Yuanfeng, dressed in a dragon robe and wearing a crown, as though he had just been pushed out by a woman from inside the house. Wang the Remonstrator was startled by the sight, but soon regained his composure. He walked up to Wang Yuanfeng, smiled, and gently coaxed him to take off the dragon robe and crown, which he then took with him. When Wang Taichang emerged from his room, he found that the guest had already left. Upon learning of what had just happened, he collapsed to the ground, pale as a ghost, and cried out, "This is truly a disaster. We've caused such a mess that none of us will survive. We're all going to be executed." Wang Taichang and his wife, unable to bear it any longer, grabbed sticks and headed toward Xiao Tsui's room. Xiao Tsui, knowing they were coming, locked the door and ignored their shouts outside. Wang Taichang, furious that Xiao Tsui refused to open the door, grabbed an axe and started chopping at it. Xiao Tsui, hiding inside, smiled and said, "Father-in-law, don't be angry. I'll take full responsibility for everything. Even if it means being chopped with a knife or axe, I will bear it all myself, so it won't cause any trouble for you and mother-in-law." "Are you really going to kill me just to vent your anger?" Hearing this, Wang Taichang paused and stopped. After Wang the Remonstrator returned home, he indeed reported to the emperor, accusing Wang Taichang of plotting rebellion, and presented the dragon robe and crown as evidence. The emperor was shocked upon hearing this, but after an investigation, he discovered that the so-called crown was merely made from sorghum stalks, and the dragon robe was just a tattered yellow cloth bundle. The emperor began to believe that Wang the Remonstrator had falsely accused Wang Taichang, and when he saw Wang Yuanfeng's silly appearance, he couldn't help but sneer at Wang the Remonstrator, saying, "With this look, do you think he could be emperor?" Afterward, the emperor handed Wang the Remonstrator over to the legal authorities for further investigation. In the legal department, Wang the Remonstrator again accused Wang Taichang's household of harboring monsters. The authorities summoned the maids and servants of Wang Taichang's house to interrogate them one by one, but they all said they had never seen any monsters. They only spoke of a crazy woman, Xiao Tsui, and Wang Taichang's silly son, who spent every day playing and laughing together. The authorities then called in Wang Taichang's neighbors, but nothing unusual was revealed. In the end, the case was settled with Wang the Remonstrator being sentenced to exile in Yunnan for the crime of false accusation. With Wang the Remonstrator's interference gone, Wang Taichang secretly felt relieved, but he also started to believe Xiao Tsui was extraordinary. He also noticed that her mother had never come, leading him to suspect that she might not be human. He then had his wife interrogate Xiao Tsui. At first, Xiao Tsui only smiled and didn't answer. When Wang Taichang's wife pressed her further, Xiao Tsui covered her mouth and teasingly said, "I am the daughter of the Jade Emperor in the Heavenly Palace. Didn't you know, mother-in-law?" Not long after, Wang Taichang was promoted. However, despite holding a high position, he began to worry about not having any grandchildren. By this time, Xiao Tsui had been in the Wang household for 3 years, but she and Wang Yuanfeng still slept in separate beds, which made Wang Taichang's wife very anxious. She ordered someone to remove Yuanfeng's bed and instructed him to sleep in Xiao Tsui's bed at night. A few days later, Wang Yuanfeng came to his mother with a troubled look and said, "Why haven't you returned the bed you borrowed? Xiao Tsui presses her legs on my stomach every night, making it hard for me to breathe. She also pinches my thighs, which keeps me awake." The maids and servants around them couldn't help but burst into laughter. Wang Taichang's wife, hearing this, was embarrassed, her face turning red. She could only scold her son and chase him out of the room. One day, Xiao Tsui was taking a bath in her room when Wang Yuanfeng barged in, shouting that he wanted to bathe with her. Xiao Tsui laughed and stopped him, telling him to wait for a moment. After she finished bathing, she added more hot water to the tub, called for a maid, undressed Yuanfeng, and helped him into the bath. The hot steam made Yuanfeng dizzy, and he yelled that he wanted to get out. Xiao Tsui wouldn't let him, covering the bath with a blanket. Before long, Yuanfeng became quiet. When Xiao Tsui lifted the blanket, she found that he had passed out. Still unflustered, she dragged Yuanfeng to the bed, dried his body, and covered him with a blanket. When Wang Taichang's wife heard that her son was dead, she rushed in, crying and angrily scolding Xiao Tsui, "You crazy girl, why did you kill my son?" Xiao Tsui smiled and said, "A fool like him is better off gone." Wang Taichang's wife, enraged, charged at Xiao Tsui, trying to headbutt her in a reckless display. The maids and servants, seeing this, hurriedly intervened, causing the scene to spiral into chaos. At some point, a young maid suddenly cried out, "Young master has woken up. The young master is awake." Upon hearing this, Wang Taichang's wife immediately stopped crying and rushed to her son's side, gently caressing him. After a short while, Wang Yuanfeng began to breathe heavily, his body drenched in sweat, even soaking the blankets. Within half an hour, the sweat gradually subsided, and Yuanfeng opened his eyes, looking confused as he gazed at the people around him. He muttered, "The things that happened before really feel like a dream. Why are all of you here?" Wang Taichang's wife noticed that her son seemed no longer foolish and was quite surprised. She quickly took him to Wang Taichang, who, after testing him, confirmed that Yuanfeng was no longer silly. The whole family rejoiced, as though they had found a precious treasure. That night, Wang Taichang's wife placed Yuanfeng's bed back in its original spot, laying out fresh bedding and pillows. When Yuanfeng entered the room, he sent all the maids and servants away. The next morning, when everyone entered his room, they found that his bedding hadn't been touched at all, and they rejoiced even more. From that day on, Wang Yuanfeng and Xiao Tsui seemed like entirely different people. All of Yuanfeng's former foolishness was gone, and the couple became inseparable, as close as could be. More than a year passed, and Wang Taichang, having been impeached by Wang the remonstrator's associates, was stripped of his official position and received a light punishment. He felt deep resentment that he could not shake off. Just then, in the family, there was a priceless jade vase, a gift from the censor of Guangxi. Wang Taichang decided to give it to a powerful official in hopes of regaining his position. Xiao Tsui, who had always admired the vase, would often hold it and admire it. One day, however, she accidentally dropped and shattered the jade vase. Feeling guilty, she immediately confessed the incident to her in-laws. At that time, Wang Taichang and his wife were already in a foul mood due to the loss of his official status. Upon hearing the news, they exploded in anger and began to scold Xiao Tsui one after another. Unable to bear it, Xiao Tsui ran back to her room and said to Wang Yuanfeng, "Is everything I've done for your family not worth more than a jade vase? Why do my in-laws not even leave me a little dignity? I'll tell you the truth, I'm not human. Many years ago, when my mother transformed, she encountered a lightning tribulation and was fortunate enough to receive your father's protection. I once divined that I had a 5-year connection with you, so I came to your home, not only to repay the kindness, but also because of this bond between us. Over the years, I've been scolded more than I have hair, but I never left because our 5 years were not yet over. Now, the time has come, and I will not stay any longer." After saying this, Xiao Tsui ran out of the house. By the time Wang Yuanfeng chased after her, Xiao Tsui had already vanished without a trace. Though Wang Taichang and his wife regretted their actions, the one who suffered the most was their son, Wang Yuanfeng. He returned to his room, looking at the powder box Xiao Tsui used, and at the shoes she wore. Heartbroken, he cried day and night, unable to sleep or eat. His body visibly withered away. Wang Taichang, deeply worried, hurriedly tried to find another wife for his son, but Wang Yuanfeng firmly rejected the idea. Wang Yuanfeng invited a skilled painter, who, based on his descriptions, painted a portrait of Xiao Tsui. He placed the portrait on his desk and prayed day and night. This continued for 2 years. One day, Wang Yuanfeng happened to return from a trip. It was already late at night when he reached the village entrance. The moonlight bathed everything in a silver glow, making the surroundings seem bright. Wang's family had a small garden at the village entrance, and as Wang Yuanfeng passed by, he heard the sound of a woman's laughter coming from within the garden. He stopped his horse and had his servant secure the saddle, then stood up to peer into the garden. Inside the garden, it seemed that 2 women were playfully chasing each other. However, due to the dense trees, Wang Yuanfeng could not see clearly. One woman wore red, and the other wore green. The woman in green said, "You should be kicked out of here, crazy girl." The woman in red retorted, "This is my family's garden, how can a guest drive out the host?" The woman in green pouted and said, "Such a shameless girl. You couldn't even be a proper daughter-in-law and were kicked out, and now you're here, shamelessly claiming this is your family's garden." The woman in red angrily said, "Even if I left, it's still better than you, who still have no family at your age." Hearing the voice of the woman in red, Wang Yuanfeng suddenly realized that it sounded strikingly similar to Xiao Tsui's. He excitedly called out. The woman in green turned toward the sound and smiled, saying, "I won't argue with you anymore, your man is here to find you." With that, she quickly left. Before long, the woman in red walked over, and indeed, it was Xiao Tsui. Wang Yuanfeng was overjoyed upon seeing her. Xiao Tsui climbed up onto the wall and laughed, saying, "It's only been 2 years, and look at how thin you've become. You're nothing but bones." Wang Yuanfeng, overwhelmed with emotion, grabbed Xiao Tsui's hand, tears streaming down his face, and shared all the feelings of longing he had endured over the past 2 years. Xiao Tsui listened, her expression complex, and sighed lightly, saying, "I know your feelings for me, but I still feel guilty and unwilling to see my in-laws. Today, I was playing with my sister, and I never expected to meet you again. It seems our fate is truly destined." Wang Yuanfeng urgently pleaded with her to return home with him, but Xiao Tsui still refused. He then begged her to stay with him in the house next to the garden, and only then did she nod in agreement. Wang Yuanfeng immediately ordered his servants to return home and report the news. When Wang Taichang's wife heard this, she was so overjoyed that she sprang up from her seat. She immediately took a sedan chair and hurried to the garden. When she opened the garden gate, Xiao Tsui rushed out to greet her. Xiao Tsui bowed respectfully to her mother-in-law, and Wang's wife stepped forward, grabbing her arm with tears in her eyes. Choking with emotion, she said, "It's all our fault. We never had the face to come and see you again. If you can forgive us and not hold a grudge, please return with us. Give us, the 2 old people, a chance to make amends." Xiao Tsui remained respectful but expressed that she still did not want to go back. Wang's wife, feeling that the garden was too desolate and cold, suggested sending more maids and servants to take care of them. Xiao Tsui replied, "I don't need others, I only want the 2 maidservants who were with me before. They were very good, and I have always remembered them. Please just send an old servant to guard the gate for us. There's no need for anyone else." Wang's wife arranged everything according to Xiao Tsui's wishes and publicly stated that Wang Yuanfeng was resting and recuperating in the house next to the garden, with food sent to him every day. After this, Xiao Tsui often urged Wang Yuanfeng to marry another wife, but he could not let go of her and refused to agree. Over a year passed, and Xiao Tsui's voice and appearance gradually began to change, something Wang Yuanfeng noticed. One day, Wang Yuanfeng took out the portrait of Xiao Tsui from before and compared it. He was shocked to realize that she now looked almost completely different from the woman in the painting, and he was filled with confusion. Xiao Tsui smiled and asked, "So, do you think I'm more beautiful now or before?" Wang Yuanfeng looked at her and shook his head, saying, "My wife is still the most beautiful, but it seems you looked better before." Xiao Tsui sighed and, with a complicated tone, said, "It seems that I've really grown old." Wang Yuanfeng immediately stopped her, saying, "You're only in your 20s, how could you have aged so quickly?" Xiao Tsui only smiled and didn't respond. Suddenly, she grabbed the portrait and quickly threw it into the fire. Wang Yuanfeng was alarmed and rushed over to try to save it, but it was too late. The portrait was completely destroyed in the flames. After a few more days, Xiao Tsui, with a serious expression, said to Yuanfeng, "Do you still remember that my father once told me that my fate is destined not to bear children? Now that your parents are growing old, and our family has only you as the sole descendant, and since I cannot bear children for you, I fear I will become an obstacle to the continuation of your family's lineage. You should marry another wife and let her fulfill the duties of filial piety for your parents in my place. I wouldn't mind if you maintained a connection with both of us. This way, it would be good for everyone. Wang Yuanfeng was reluctant, but after carefully considering her words, he felt she made sense and agreed. Soon after, he arranged an engagement with the daughter of historian Zhuang. As the wedding day approached, Xiao personally sewed new clothes and shoes for the bride and sent them to his mother. When the bride arrived, Yuanfeng was struck with shock. Her appearance, mannerisms, and behavior were exactly like Xiao's. Filled with suspicion, Yuanfeng quickly went to the house next to the garden to find Xiao, only to discover she was nowhere to be found. Yuanfeng anxiously asked the maidservants, and one of them took out a red handkerchief and handed it to him, saying, "The young mistress has returned to her parents' home. She asked me to give this to you before leaving." Yuanfeng unfolded the handkerchief and found a jade pendant wrapped inside. He stood there, staring at the handkerchief and the jade pendant, understanding. Xiao had already left and would not return again. With a heavy heart, he left with the maidservants and returned home. After this, Yuanfeng still thought of Xiao every moment. Fortunately, whenever he looked at his new wife, his mood could somewhat ease because she was so much like Xiao, as if Xiao had never left him. Yuanfeng suddenly realized, this marriage with the Zhuang family had been predicted by Xiao long ago. She had intentionally transformed into the image of the Zhuang family's daughter to comfort his endless longing in this way. At the end of the story, the author provides the following commentary. A fox, for the kindness unknowingly bestowed by the Wang family, still remembers and seeks to repay it in every possible way. Yet, the Wang family, having enjoyed Xiao's rebirth for Yuanfeng, only dismisses her when a jade vase is broken, scolding and accusing her without regard for their bond. Such character truly proves despicable. Although Xiao and Wang Yuanfeng were separated for a time, she eventually reunited with him and left quietly after everything was arranged. Such deep affection is indeed something to be admired. The bonds of love expressed by immortals are far more profound than the shallow affections of us mere mortals. The story mentions Xiao, who is revered as the overlord, and was a renowned military strategist and politician during the late Qin dynasty. Along with figures like Liu Bang, who later became the first emperor of the Han dynasty, he helped overthrow the Qin dynasty, which ruled China at the time. However, as they vied for control of the country, Xiao's army, the Chu forces, clashed with Liu Bang's Han army in a series of fierce battles. Ultimately, Xiao was defeated and trapped, with enemies closing in from all sides, causing him to lament his fate. In the dead of night, Xiao drank wine to drown his sorrows, bewailing his ill fortune. His wife, Yuji, unwilling to be a burden on him, stood by his side and, taking advantage of a moment when Xiao was distracted, drew his sword from his waist, cutting across her throat, thus ending her life. In despair, Xiao destroyed his boats and chose to fight to the end, but ultimately, he was defeated. In the end, he fell by the banks of the Wu River and took his own life. The story also mentions Wang Zhaojun, one of the four great beauties of ancient China. In the first year of the Jian Zhao period, Wang Zhaojun was selected to join the palace as a maid. Legend has it that the court painter, Mao Yanshou, took advantage of the opportunity to ask for a bribe. Many of the other palace maids, eager to be favored by the emperor, gave Mao Yanshou large sums of money. Although Wang Zhaojun was exceptionally beautiful, her noble character meant she refused to offer a bribe, and so Mao Yanshou deliberately painted her in an unflattering light. In the first month of the Ningyuan era, the Xiongnu chieftain, Shan Yu, visited Emperor Yuan of Han, seeking to marry a Han woman. Due to the unflattering portrait, Emperor Yuan, believing Wang Zhaojun to be less attractive, gave her to the chieftain. Upon meeting her, the chieftain was overjoyed by her beauty and wrote a letter expressing his willingness to ensure peace on the border for the future. There are also unofficial historical accounts that suggest Emperor Yuan deeply regretted his decision and eventually had the painter Mao Yanshou executed. Alright. That's all for today's tale, Xiao Tsui. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. Feel free to leave your comments and share with others. See you again in the next issue.